Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Cool. It's the top. Hi, Carsten.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, it's the top of the hour now, but let's wait the usual 4 minutes before starting.
I'll make a mental note not to complain too much about not too large participation in SIBO.
Hi, Ricard.
So just because we have a few people here who might be interested, I just responded to Eric Finke's comments on CBOR update 8610 grammar. So there are 5 pull requests in that repository now, which I think are addressing Eric's comments. So I think that replies to everything. We now have replies to everything that was commented going into the ISG meeting tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay, at least my clock says 4 past. So let's get started and welcome everyone. This is an interim of the co-working group. I'm Marco, my co-chairs are Carsten Bormann, Jaime Jimenez. And this is an official IETF meeting, so the note well applies. It's a lot about IPR patterns and so on. And if you participate in or you contribute to a discussion where IPRs are involved to the best of your knowledge, you must disclose those, or you may choose to not participate in the discussion. But it's even more important about our code of conduct, so please be nice and professional with one another. And the agenda for today is mostly about one big topic, or Clar. We do have a draft around for a while now, but we wanted to start tackling with live discussions a number of PRs and issues at a time, also at the interim meeting. And we have 4 PRs for today. We may have time to check more items, time permitting. That's the only item we have so far. Any more items or agenda bashing from anyone? Hearing none, let's start with the first PR, and thanks, Christian, for helping out with the notes. How do you want to proceed, Carsten? Do you want to share your screen or just discuss?
Well, I probably don't want to share my screen because my computer is going to log up again. I just noticed that I have forgotten to make an announcement. The core SID document is in auth 48 now. So the authors are working on answering the 57 questions that the RC editor had. So don't expect that to happen within a couple of days.
Right.
Okay. So if somebody could simply share the GitHub repo for CodeJar, then I think we could just go through the issues.
Marco, can you clear my request?
Sure thing. Thank you, Christian.
So maybe you can start with the editor's copy. So just we see what we have committed ourselves to do. So 112.
I think that is the editor's copy.
That is, yeah. So this is the content of the current internet draft that describes the process, and so we are doing a bit of 1 and maybe a little bit of 2 here already. And of course, at some point we probably should do 0 as well, which includes considering whether this is a document we want to go for working group adoption with. So that's what we are trying to do here. And if you go back to the GitHub repo page and click on issues, just as a reminder, there are some 30 issues that were collected. One came in today from Christian. Thank you. That's actually a pretty important observation. So this is kind of a meta issue that we will probably use to fork off individual issues. And we said we were going to tackle 1 issue per interim, and we are kind of late with that. So instead, I thought we might do 4 issues at once in this meeting. So if you go to pull requests, this has 4 pull requests that are looking at issue 7, 8, 9, and 10. And 9 probably is the most complicated one. So maybe we should just quickly dispatch with the other ones. You're not signed in?
Say again, please? Sorry.
You're not signed in, but just in case you want to type in notes right away.
That's a good point. Signed in now.
Okay, so why don't we start with 8? Because it's at the bottom of the list. So this is a relatively simple pull request because essentially we have worked on this issue already for a while, and we have gotten the changes we wanted in the registry in 2023 already. And I think we just have to keep in mind that this change has been made, So that's why the issue is called out in the clarifications document. And there's also a pointer to the errata report itself, because that has a few examples of what would be a valid content format registration and what would not be a valid content format registration. I don't know where these examples came from, whether these actually were attempts to register something, because I can't find a trace for that. Yeah, so something like text plain care set ISO 8859-1 would be with content coding deflate, would be hopelessly 1980s, but it's a valid content format registration. While down there, media type application co-op group JSON with content coding UTF-8 is not correct, because UTF-8 is not a content coding. And all these examples are actually quite useful to go through with people who want to register a content format, so they have a few examples to look at. Of course, you could copy that over. I don't have an opinion. I think that's already in a stable document, which is this errata report. So this just points to it.
Yeah, I think just pointing to the erratum is sufficient. A very curious person can find there the examples.
Yeah.
No need to repeat them.
Okay, I think that's all we have to say about this. So again, we already dispatched of this in January 2023, but we still have some education to do. Okay. Yeah, that's another question I had, whether there should be links to the GitHub issues, which also contain some interesting discussion, which sometimes is misleading and wrong and so on. But it's interesting that this discussion happened. Right now, I did not do that. But I think we should be open to actually doing that. And I think actually in the epoch case, the text actually does point to the issue, because we still have some work to do before we can finish that. Okay, the second one is the URI path encoding of trailing slash. I think that is, again, not something where we actually have to do work. But it is useful to explain this, because people do get this wrong. So this is with the clarifications intent of this document. And I think when we revisit 7252, we should add this text that is right now just a planned addition, add a note what the implications of what's written up there is. Yeah, we might even add an example.
I have a few input here on 3 possible corner cases that are not problematic or raising bugs or anything, but maybe they are worth mentioning. So the first one is for section 6.4, it cannot produce a single URI path option that has an empty value.
Correct.
Right, okay. Well, for the other algorithm instead, 6.5, as I understand, it cannot produce a URI with the empty path component.
With an initial empty path component.
Right, you mean with present but with 0 path segments. Right, because you always add the slash.
Oh, okay.
Right?
I didn't know that.
I mean, it's all consistent and correct, but it's a few very similar situations where I spelled them out to be ready also and to have them in front of me. So it cannot produce a URI with the empty path component.
Right.
When starting from the options. Right, because if you don't have any URI path options, you build an empty string called resource identifier, I think, or something. It remains empty, and that's because you append a slash to the authority component. And that should be the empty path component then, right?
So for each URI path option in the request, append a single character slash.
Slash value, and so on. But suppose you receive a request with no URI path options. As I understand, in that case, what you append to authority is slash.
Where does it say so?
In section 6.5.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's the other algorithm. Getting there. Yeah, that's step 7.
Okay. So this after all the work in 6, which produces slash-free canonical value, we do the extra. Yeah, we had a choice which of the 2 representations we were going to favor, and for some reason we went for single slash. So I don't have an opinion on this, but this is what the standard says. So.
But they are equivalent under scheme-based normalization anyway.
Right.
Yeah, the underscore is under the scheme-based. So if you just use the scheme-independent normalization, they are not equivalent.
Yeah, I'm trying to complete the notes because maybe I talked too fast.
Yeah, so I didn't get this initially, and I'm still a bit confused what your point is.
So
it's probably a good idea to add a few more examples.
So point 1 is fine. Point 2 was on the algorithm in section 6.5. Well, I had some pre-prepared notes, so. Oh, where am I? Here. Okay, and the third one is on the same algorithm, section 6.5. You may receive, even if it may look anomalous, a request with a single URI path option, which is empty. So that cannot be produced by the algorithm in 6.4.
Yeah.
But let's say a server receives a request made that way. Well, it would work. The URI that you produce has the path component consisting of a single empty segment. Right?
Yeah.
Based on step 6 of the algorithm. Because you append slash empty, right?
Which algorithm?
6.5.
6.5 composes URIs.
Exactly. So if you receive a request with a single URI path option with empty value, you produce a URI with a path component consisting of a single empty segment.
Yes, which you would also have produced if that single UI path option wasn't there.
Right.
So the question is whether there's any implication that a server should be treating a single empty UI path component the same way as an absent UI path. And I don't think we currently say this.
So I couldn't notice any bad implication or any strange thing. I just thought maybe it's better to spell out these corner cases, have an example, whatever, because they are really at the limit.
There is one. I think there are implications when it comes to converting back and forth with CRI. So when a server is thinking in CRI space, then the behavior around a single empty slash probably matters. And I think what we wound up with CRIs, but I don't know off my head, is that from a CRI point of view, a single empty slash is indeed equivalent because of the URI resolution rules, but multiple empty segments in the beginning would be different from a single one. But a single one is the same as nothing at all.
Yes. And this is all inherited from HTTP. So whatever we do, we should compare with what HTTP did. I definitely did not look into RFC 9110 on this subject. So I think we should do some research there.
Yeah, that's all I had.
Yeah, but I think the to-do item here is to add examples to the pull request 7.
Ah, 32. You mean about issue 7?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay, I think that finishes issue 7, pull request 32. So the next one is the term request URI. And I think that's definitely a bug. So there needs to be an addition, hold for document update, like, I tried to provide a definition.
I think it looks good. It's also consistent with the use made later on, mostly in the section about forward proxies.
Right.
There is a caveat on this that I have to raise from implementation experience, because I'm using the term request URI a lot in AIO co-op. But the request URI and there are two things. There is the URI that you request, and there is the base for resolving anything in the response, and those are different. So whatever we do, we should clarify the difference between those, especially which is only really a difference when it comes to responses to multicast requests.
Okay. Yeah, so this means we probably should have another term and also introduce this in the terminology. What would be a good term for that base for resolving a response?
I don't have a good suggestion yet. we talk about the possibly the URI of the represent. Like I was thinking in the direction of what we're doing with e-tags as the tag, like the tagged representation, but that's about representations and not about URI. So not sure.
So maybe that's also something that should be added to the response document.
I think something is there already, but I'll check.
Mm-hmm. This has a single occurrence of the string URI. Talking about the request for header, whatever a header is. And what is request for? So this shouldn't say request for header, this should say response for option.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, but that was not the point here. The point is that the base issue is not really discussed in that document, and it probably should.
So I note that down as something to do in the issue.
Yes. So if we fully discuss the subject there, then maybe we can just point to that discussion from the COCLA. Okay, anything else about this?
Otherwise, it looks straightforward.
Okay, so let's talk about the pull request for issue 9.
Oof.
Yeah, so my objective here, first of all, was to point out that we don't have inconsistency problem. We have well-defined the matchboxing we use both for the message IDs and for the tokens. So in theory, we don't have a problem, but then we have the observation that it's really bad to throw away all that state each time you do a rekeying. And there's also the example in RFC 9006, the TCP for constrained nodes document that talks about short-lived TCP connections, which also have the problem that we lose state more than we would like to. So clearly we have some objectives here that aren't beautifully fulfilled, and so some additional work may be required. And what the text at the bottom of the screen and below the screen is saying is that where we actually are working on something like a rekeying document or something like that, we should be addressing this problem in that document. So
Yeah.
kudos, for instance, should say what we want to do there. And that probably should not have the conservative approach from DTLS, which was based on DTLS not being able to make up their minds about this either.
If I can jump in on the topic of kudos,
Yes.
we have I think a relevant section already, because the default behavior for kudos is to terminate all observations. However, there is a particular flag you can set if you wish to preserve them. And if that's the case, we have a special procedure defined to prevent any issues with let's call it mismatching between a request and response. And on a high level, this procedure is based on keeping track of any partial IV that you have for ongoing observations. And you make sure that after rekeying, you jump beyond that partial IV, so you don't accidentally reuse a partial IV you already have for an ongoing previous observation. So this is section 4.6. Of course, there's much more detail there about this topic.
Okay.
So I think in kudos we may actually have this covered already, and hopefully things should be fine there.
This is not just about observations, right? This is also about pending requests and more generally non-traditional responses. So I yet have to review kudos, but I think that there is some kind of the observations. What observations really means is anything that could still have responses.
I think sorry, there's some echo, but I think for the when you're talking about not considering observations, we should double check this, of course, but there is some text where we, for instance, say that once you initiate kudos, you shouldn't initiate kudos when you have another request pending, a non-observed, like a non-observer request. So if you have some requests pending, you're waiting for a response, don't initiate kudos at that moment. Either wait or, well, terminate the waiting for those requests.
So who initiates kudos?
Both we have it. I mean, we say typically it's the client, but the server can also initiate kudos at the point when it receives a request from the client. So both sides can initiate. It's like
The problem is that the server doesn't necessarily know that the client has sent a request. So this is really about when the server has started processing the request. It should no longer send a rekey.
I'm not sure exactly how we phrase things. I would have to double check if there's some corner case, something we're missing. But I do believe we have something like that you shouldn't initiate kudos or run kudos while you're. But let's see how that's actually phrased in detail in our text currently. This is something we may need to refine a bit. Yeah.
Because from the point of view of the client who just says send out a request, if the next thing it receives is the rekeying, it has violated the requirement without actually being responsible for this violation.
Well, then it will have gotten a response to that initial request, right? Which is the response initiating the rekeying. So it's
no, the two packets could just completely cross each other. So at exactly the same time, when the client sends a new request, the server decides we have to do a rekey now.
It couldn't, because the server will only be able to start rekeying when it receives a request from the client. It has to be triggered by the client.
There can still be another request in flight while it's processing requests. So it's unnecessary to know that.
Okay, so it's like the client sends two requests and the second one triggers the rekeying.
Yeah.
And you have, I see where you're going. Yeah. Maybe that's still that's an issue. Yeah.
The first one triggers rekeying.
I'm relatively confident that we can generalize this in such a way that we don't have to special case observations, and that it's just about whether or not any pending requests from the side that is setting that particular flag will or will not be terminated.
But being very strict about pending requests, and ensuring they're all terminated. Yeah. Well, now the reason we have a separate section about the observe is just because it's nice to be able to preserve the observations after rekeying. But in the non-observed case, we should double check the text that there's no corner case we're missing.
Still on kudos, but more from a high-level point of view, on the topic of the original issues for the pull request. It didn't change anything from OSCORE in terms of matching based on token or message ID. So OSCORE was never strict as DTLS or the DTLS case was, and that's unchanged by kudos.
Okay.
What kudos did was fixing a security issues related to key update, and if you want responses living across key epochs. And after discussing with Christian also at some point, it was agreed to propose a general fix in the kudos draft for situations that went beyond kudos specifically. And it's in that short section 3, which became a full-fledged update point for the OSCORE RFC. So essentially, if the server produces a response protected with a context different than the one used to protect and unprotect the request, then there has to be a use of a fresh partial IV from the server in that response. And we actually first noted this problem in the context of group OSCORE, and then we realized that it was coming back here during a very kudos execution. But at that point, it got just generalized. So it's not about the exact matching, really, but something around it.
Okay, I have to read all that. So if some of you can make a PR on the PR that fixes what is being said about OSCORE, that would be useful.
Can you show the OSCORE part? What is starting now at the end of the screen, basically, the bullet point 1.
Yeah, the rest only really talks about DTLS, and if you scroll up a little. Well, that was going on.
The other eye. You're a Mac user.
Yeah, basically, again, to my understanding, OSCORE didn't really change anything in terms of matching functions, and kudos is not changing anything either. Kudos is fixing for itself and more in general what would otherwise be a security issue with the partial IVs.
Right.
So somehow it's still relevant. It's not exactly the topic or as originally imagined for this PR, but still, it probably
Yeah,
falls
but
under the same bucket.
what you're saying is that if the people who are using OSCOR are using match boxes that are larger than the periods during which you do not rekey, then you have a security problem. And Kudos fixes that.
Well, that section that applies to all Kudos in itself and more in general.
Okay. So that's really something that we should say, that OSCOR, in conjunction with section 3 of this document, has a much more useful solution. And then we can discuss specifically what Kudos adds to this.
Yeah, which is pretty simple, actually. If you protect the response with something different than the request, put the partial IV there.
But I think the point here, one relevant point here, is that OSCOR without any rekeying mechanism does not usually match request and response across contexts, and thus the situation of having a different key around does not occur, and there are just no responses across rekeyings because OSCOR doesn't do that. And it's only when something introduces a mechanism where this works, such as Kudos or group OSCOR, then this section 3 becomes relevant.
I mean, you also have Appendix B2 from OSCOR itself, but then the idea is to just terminate observations at least, yeah. Or not do this matching between any pending request and response after the rekeying happened. That's my understanding, at least.
Yeah, I think we need lots more text here.
But on the original topic, there's little or nothing to say about OSCOR, probably because, yeah, it started less restrictive than the DTLS case anyway. You just do the normal matching by token and message ID as usual, irrespective of the key update. That was not originally part of the OSCOR design at all, probably. And at best, you had Appendix B2, and yeah, you just seamlessly continued.
Okay, so you could send the request before rekeying and get the response after rekeying?
Right.
No. I don't think that in OSCOR as it is written, that can happen.
Yeah, I think no, because I recall we discussed this also regarding observations with your and other people, and they seem to say that those should terminate. So then it would be logical that other pending requests are also terminated.
Yeah, I think it's not phrased explicitly that observations can terminate, but I've always assumed that also.
Yeah, it's not clear. It's not clear from the text. I was saying.
Let's make up our mind and write this up in this issue.
Yes.
Or actually in the text that goes into the document.
But thinking of the original issue, again, seemed like OSCOR was seamless, but then it added new stuff, related to the preservation of observations, and then on the use of partial AVs in responses. And yes, Kudos is handling those, the partial AV aspect in general, and the observations, well, as part of a key update done exactly with Kudos.
Yeah, but the basic idea behind having these 2 points, point 1 and point 2, that's still valid. We just have to make sure that the examples we use for explaining that are actually right.
Right. On the DTLS part, is this text already fully addressing the original point of the issue? Because reading through the issue, some people were saying, "Oh, okay, so let's just remove the strict matching requirement. Let's relax it, basically."
Yeah, that's a completely wrong approach to do this, because that creates problems. I mean, we don't even have a way to link a new DTLS epoch uniquely to an old DTLS epoch. So somebody might generate two different epochs based on the same starting epoch, and you don't know which of these you should use for actually sending your response. So I think we cannot currently go beyond what section 911 says, which is when you rekey, you have a new epoch, and you cannot carry any state from the old epoch to the new epoch.
Right.
And that is safe consistent, and it's also not very satisfying. And what this text here tries to say is, if you want to go beyond the consistent but not very satisfying solution, then you have to do one of two things. You have to define how the chaining of the epochs actually works. And you might need to indicate capabilities in this context and selected choices, because if one end thinks they can do chaining and the other end thinks they can't, then obviously you have a problem.
So that means that we need signaling messages on DTLS. I have an issue on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a signaling message. It might very well be an option. One of those. And your new issue that we should have signaling messages and BERT and all this stuff in the UDP, on the UDP side, I completely agree with.
Staying with the topic of session of epochs. How about DTLS 1.3 session resumption? 7252 talks about things as they are in DTLS 1.2, and then DTLS 1.3 adds things that we don't talk about, so we don't know what to do with them. Does this go in the same kind of? Do we have to treat them in the same issue anyway, or is the PR is PR 34 about the general case, and then we'll talk about the more concrete case of possible enhancements in DTLS 1.3 or interactions with it in a different issue?
Well, the point one here means we have to write up stuff either in the new additions we do, like kudos, or write them up separately if we just want to improve the situation, if we want to make an enhancement. And the problem, of course, is that if we don't have here's how you use TLS 1.3 with the COAP document, we don't have a reason why a TLS 1.3 document should have a different behavior with a new epoch than TLS 1.2. So we are stuck with a not so desirable behavior, even if TLS 1.3 could do better.
So the first paragraphs of the PR are a recap of the original issue and
Yes.
why it ended up like that, but nothing more.
Right.
Okay.
So the new thinking starts at however.
Right.
Sorry for the scrolling around. I sometimes forget that people are watching my screen.
Yeah, it feels like Oscar over time found its way to fix things here and there, at least.
Yeah, that should be recorded here. So
Yeah.
if Oscar is different from, I mean, the term epoch is a TLS specific term, and I don't even know whether it's still used in TLS 1.3. Probably should look this up. So whatever applies to Oscar may be different, and also the TCP connections in RC 8323 are another kind of epoch that we have to say something about. The word epoch doesn't occur in RC 8446.
Another direction of generalization. Here we're talking of this matchboxing, if I understand correctly, talks about request-response matching.
Also about message ID matching, but that's much easier to ignore.
About matching?
Message ID matching.
Okay, yeah, but that is so request response matching to tokens and MID matching. There are a few cases in co-op based documents where things talk about like being from the same security context or from the same source address, in particular about blockwise. Does that go in here, or is that to
Yes.
something to top of that?
I think that goes in here. I haven't looked at the blockwise implications yet. So we need to make sure that this is addressed as well. So observe is just an example, but it's the example that is generally mentioned as the most pressing one because people don't want to set up all their observations after rekeying or after resetting up the TLS connection or any other such event.
Okay.
Yeah, so probably we need subsections about TLS 1.3, about TCP connections, about OSCAR. These are all situations where you lose transport context or transport or security context and need to say how to continue after that.
If you have security at both layers, at least they should remain independent and not affect each other, right?
Yeah, I don't know. That's the real question. Like if you started an observation on I mean things for observations if the lower layer switches over, then the response can't go through anymore anyway. So like the token space is not there anymore. For blockwise requests at least, kind of there is not the issue of getting through the token space.
Yeah, so the point here is, can you actually continue using the token space? Can you port over some of the token space? That's what I could call matchbox linking.
I see now where this is going. Yeah, that sounds interesting, but that's something to consider. In which case, buying a bit from other ideas, it might really be a good idea to look into CSM into signaling messages, because they are because all the other messages that we can send are already sitting inside the token space, and signaling messages might be a way to influence what is going on in the token.
Yeah.
In the token space, like you can reserve at most one token with a message. Or of course go out of band and do something with DTLS options or something like that.
Thinking of the original point of the issue, is still good to keep a strict matching for transport layer security.
Yeah, we already have that.
Yeah.
The question is, can we describe how to not to loosen it up, but to have a secure way of linking these matchboxes? I think that the IV thing is an interesting case about linking matchboxes.
But maybe it's better to focus on fixing the DTLS TLS case first.
Fixing as in enhancing.
Yeah. Yes, bringing it up to date. Yeah.
Well, I think we don't want to do something that then only works for the TLS case.
No, sure. Just to start with something, or otherwise we risk to be stretched.
Yeah, but I think when designing this, you have to keep all the variants in mind. It's not possible to
Okay.
to do this without making sure that whatever you do doesn't break the other case.
Mm. Yeah, but for Oscar, even Appendix B2, I don't think was discussing any matching issues or adaptations at all. And that's really as far as we could get with key update before kudos or before ad hoc.
Yeah, but I think that given the implications of Section 3, at latest it should be clear that B2 is a clean cut, and nothing that happened before B2 happens impacts what is after.
Yeah, B2 is interesting because it includes the problematic behavior of protecting a response with a different context, but it doesn't really end up in the same security problem. So because of its particular design, it's fine from that point of view. But then we ended up for the sake of simplicity in that text of section 3 to consider appendix B2 as an exception. And that's just fine if you really want to use it. And by the way, it's going to be deprecated practically by Kudos. But other than that exception, in general, you should include the partial IV to be safe.
Yes, are you saying that B2 essentially assumes there is no strict boxing?
Now I should retry to reproduce the attack, but basically you don't end up into the same bad consequences that you would end up in if using Kudos, for example, if you don't have the inclusion of the partial IV, because of the ways and the amount of times that Appendix B2 uses the temporary contexts. I think it was about that. So it wasn't planned, I think, but still in the analysis they made at the time, probably they noticed that it was fine with respect to those problems. And it's not worth fixing it on something about which it doesn't really suffer anyway. That's why we phrase it as an exception.
I think the point in B2 is also that there are those intermediate contexts and it works for those, but
Yeah.
It's not something anyone should be. B2 was always an example, and Kudos is just making it more clear that if you want to do that example properly, that Kudos is what you get.
Even if it's just an example, it's mandatory in lightweight M2M, for example. I mean, to support and to use in the initial parts of the bootstrapping and registrations. So yeah, from the point of view of that problem, Appendix B2 is fine, only that the general fix worries about fixing things for good.
Okay, by now I'm completely confused about what the status quo in OSCAR is. So I would be really happy if somebody could write this up in this section.
At one point, hopefully before the next IETF, I'll do a review of Kudos, and that might make it be a good fit to do that in the same round.
To simplify, it doesn't take any stance on the token or message ID matching, and through Kudos, it offers a way to preserve observations across CRI updates, and it fixes a security issue that you have if you don't use sequence numbers properly in responses that live across a key update. But yeah, on the first point that originated that issue, it's neutral, like Oscar was, I think.
Yeah, so maybe we need to be more explicit about token scope here as well. And message ID scope for that matter. It's less important, but so what DTLS does is the DTLS text in 7252 does it tells you that the scope of these two is definitely limited to the DTLS epoch. And Oscar probably needs to have some statement about scope as well. So that if there is no such statement, then that would be an actual bug.
Yeah, and the current Oscar, it doesn't seem to say anything about that at all. Yeah.
Yeah, but current Oscar doesn't say anything that would allow it. So it's not happening.
It's like, since it's not saying anything, it implies the meaning is that the epoch is limited to that set of key material, and the epoch is terminated when you rekey.
So that's implied but not said explicitly, and that probably needs to be said explicitly.
Yeah, it seems to be implied, and like we discussed, like I mentioned with Joran and others about Appendix B2, what they had in mind there, and my understanding they really had in mind that observations should be terminated. So that should mean that that epoch is over, and nothing is transferred over to the new epoch after rekeying. Yeah. But yes, maybe good to say explicitly.
So is it possible for Oscar to actually fork a security context?
You can make a new one based on material in an old one.
Yeah.
But then you delete the old one.
So I think the answer is no.
I guess so, yeah.
So even in the multicast case?
Well, there you have a whole group context, and then you derive a different pairwise subcontext. But saying that there's no fork, if the group manager decides to do a rekeying, it's a rekey to the whole group.
And there's a well-defined place where the old context is discarded.
In group score. Well, as soon as the new material is received and installed, the old material is discarded.
And in Kudos, we also have explicit points about this is exactly the moment to discard the old key material.
Okay. I think that's really important, so we can have a well-defined linking.
Yeah, and that's there.
Yeah, that's specified. You need an explicit confirmation from the other peer, an evidence of use of the new material. And when you have that evidence, you discard the old one.
And if you don't have that?
If you don't have the evidence,
could you derive another new context from the old context? And then
if you rerun a new key update execution, yes.
Without the evidence, you would abort the execution and revert back to the key material you had when you started Kudos.
In a sense, the group of score case is simpler because it's all in the hands of the group manager.
Right.
And if you are left behind for whatever reason, well, you'll notice because you won't be able to decrypt things anymore for a while, and eventually you'll talk to the group manager to fetch the latest things.
Yeah, I'm thinking about partitioning scenarios in which part of the group is doing something different from the other part of the group.
The group is managed by the group manager. So unless the group manager is a distributed entity, which would then need to have its own way of dealing with that, the group can't just fragment.
Right.
So what do you do if your group manager crashes?
You can just communicate. You can't rekey, but you can keep communicating, I guess. No one can join the group.
Yeah, but is there any way to repair that?
Start the group manager back up with the same state it had when it crashed.
So that is, by the way, also an unresolved. So I think that is an unresolved issue in Kudos, and one of the reasons I'll have to take some time for that review.
Okay. Yeah, so in the 90s, when we were working on group communication, we essentially always made the simplification and said that you would have a manager, you would have some central point, and when you lost that, well, that's tough. But that is, of course, not really prime time capable.
If that is lost, what?
Then you are lost. You have to set up a new group. Cannot save your group.
Yeah, I think that in the group manager case, a group manager can be designed to be crash resistant, but that crash resistance always will come at some synchronization cost. So it will have to commit to some new state, and then only after that commitment, also like committing internally to its whatever its backend store is, and then when continuing after a crash, process that journal entry or whatever it is. So in particular, you cannot just back up the group manager and restore it from the backup and hope that it goes. You'd need to commit to some distributed data store and then recover that, provided there's the right quorum here.
Yeah, but that becomes like that becomes like some kind of general problem related to many types of services. How do you ensure that?
Okay, so I just wanted to bring this up because this is a distributed system, so all distributed systems thinking applies. Okay, so still, can someone write a paragraph or two about what the situation in OSCORE is and what the situation maybe in group OSCORE is?
Christian, you mentioned in line 179 that you wanted to look into that in parallel with kudos. Of the notes,
Yes,
sorry,
but,
not.
yeah. I can't promise all of that, but kind of doing all the updates, but I'll at least provide some input.
Okay. And Carsten, in Grupo Score, the partial AV thing is done basically in the same way, and we did it there before noting of the general fix needed in kudos and introduced there. And on the observations, in Grupo Score first, again, we added a way to preserve observations across key update. And Christian also contributing on further improving that to the point that the group can kind of live forever with observations in principle still ongoing,
Okay.
unless they are intentionally terminated, of course.
Yeah, please write a paragraph and throw that into that section.
Okay.
Okay, I think really the next step will be for people who know the specific situations to write up a sentence or a paragraph so we know what the landscape actually is, and then go from the full view of the landscape with the next step. So my hypothesis that everything is in order, just not very witty, maybe isn't quite correct.
Well, this was a tricky one.
Yes.
We knew that.
Yeah, there are about 10 more of this caliber in the issues list. So this will be a fun journey.
Yeah.
So enjoy the ride.
Yes. Okay, are we done?
Just wanted to check if, Christian, if you wanted to say anything on the issue you opened earlier today, number 35, that was mentioned in passing before.
Generally, we have a lot of open issues that we could or could not talk about. As you mentioned, that particular one, I think it's really about keeping track. Just keep track of things that we were too specific in, and like ensure that we can use Bird everywhere. Ensure that we don't restate too many things into not restate, but reinvent the wheel in too many transports.
So generalize features whenever possible.
It may even have been a good idea at that point to not extend some features to all the world. But now, kind of with the years of experience we've gathered here, I think we can make some generalizations also for the benefit of implementers.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but we have to write these up and make sure that this is kind of done in an orderly way.
Yeah.
Okay, any more particular issues you wanted to check in the remaining time since we're here?
Well, I have to run to the next meeting pretty soon.
Right.
Then let's call it a day.
Yeah, and just a reminder, we have one more interim meeting in 2 weeks from today before IETF 120, and then we were planning to resume at the end of August. So if we follow the same cadence of core on the odd weeks, that would be August 28 provisionally. Of course, alternating with CBOR as usual. Out of your head, Christian, do you foresee any possible issues with CBOR?
I'll let you know if that ever happens, but other than that, we'll just kind of keep it running.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Then, if there's no other AOB, let's talk again in 2 weeks latest.
Yeah, this is still before the draft deadline. So
Right.
things we do in 2 weeks, we still can submit. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for the minutes, Christian and Richard.
No problem, of course.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.